He Swallowed His Fire by Suzanne Seeley. Once upon a time in a faraway land, high on a mountaintop overlooking the tiny village of Elderberry, lived a fire-breathing dragon named Filibert. Legend had it that Filibert had been hatched from an egg that glittered like an enormous crystal in the sunlight. The crystal was said to have given Filibert his ferocious fire. Dragons are, by nature, hoarders, so often their lairs became as thick as berry brambles with treasures. Filibert didn't hoard gold or art or magic like other dragons. Filibert's special weakness was hats. How he first came to love tops, as he called them, he couldn't really say, but suspected this love derived from his great, tall, handsome great-grandfather dragon, for great-grandfather dragon was always dapper in his fine herringbone fedora, so high up it sometimes stuck through the clouds. While other young dragons wanted magic stars plucked from the night sky or pots of gold gathered from the ends of rainbows, even precious works of art collected throughout the centuries, all Filibert ever requested for his birthday gift was a brand new hat. Once Filibert's best friend, Montagler Dragon, received a soft pastel painting by a Frenchman named Claude Monet and another by his friend Edgar Degas. It was of pretty ballerinas stretching and preening before the dance. Oh, Filibert blinked at these marvels and wondered if he might create a hat as frothy and sublime as Degas' ballerina Tudis. Soon it would be Mother Dragon's 999th birthday, and he wanted to make a special hat for her. His fingers fairly itched. So Filibert got out his shimmering ribbons and swaths of frothy tulle and snippets of this and snatches of that, his scissors and silken threads and fancy trims, and began to cut and to piece, his mind afire. Filibert worked and worked until the stars came out and his lids dropped. But come morning, he was back at his worktable, his dragon claws cutting and twisting and fluffing and tucking. How elegant Mother Dragon would be in the annual Dragon Day parade. Never had Mother Dragon thought Filibert's love of hats odd or peculiar, or turned down her mouth at him or wagged a finger and tut 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 him. Instead, whenever Mother Dragon saw Filibert debut one of his new creations, she would lift her height, smooth silky neck and smile. Mother Dragon knew Filibert had special gifts. Early one morning, tugging the warm woolen muffs of the reindeer knit down over his small dragon ears, Filibert stood out on the frozen ledge in front of his lair watching the shivering, bare-headed children way down below trudge through the snow toward the school bell. He snorted out 2 lines of fire and kicked his foot at the children. Remembering back to their terrified faces the moment they caught sight of him, he smiled from ear to ear. How they screamed and threw up their hands and scattered like mice. This was always hellish good fun. He saw himself laughing and slapping his knee. Ever since he was a very small dragon, he had always strived to win the medal for the most malevolent dragon of the year. But because all young dragons are taught increasingly clever scaring strategies in dragon training school, competition was stiff. That afternoon, puffing out a plume of fire, Filibert made up his mind. The very next day, he would thunder down into the village and scare the wits out of the children the moment they walked out of the schoolhouse. Wearing a devilish grin, he returned to his lair to primp and to dance around in his hat-cluttered lair. Taking in his multitudinous hats, his small yellow-green dragon eyes glowed with delight. Hats were everywhere, piled on shelves, stacked along the floor. Hats overflowed trunks and boxes and hung on the walls. There were hats in cabinets and stored beneath the bed. Hats even hung from the chandelier. If wealth were counted in hats, Filibert was a very rich dragon. Head held high, chest puffed out, trying on one hat after the other, Filibert admired himself in the wall mirror. Sometimes he wore 3, even 4 hats at a time, and had to dip to pass through the door. He placed a bright red hat with a goldfinch feather on his head, and then a black and white polka dot bowler, and then balanced a violet hat with chartreuse and royal blue stripes on top. "Excellent!" he exclaimed. "How fine!" But then, suddenly, the next day, Filibert's fire went out, and he had to take to his bed for a whole week. Miserable, he tossed and turned and snuffled and sneezed and coughed, and he could not get warm no matter what. "I'm dying," he thought, but dragons don't die. His fire could not go out. Every day he awoke, he groaned. "No fire, no fire, no fire, puffing out a tepid puff of smoke. And because dragons are by nature very, very hot, Filibert began to worry that his fire would never come back. He simply did not know what to do. And then one morning, he opened his eyes and coughed. His fire was back. It raged out of his mouth as red and flaming as a Chinese ribbon. So, he went to the cupboard and took down the beautiful tall gold brocade hat his father had given to him on his 100th birthday and placed it on his head. "Excellent," he exclaimed. "How fine." And again he went and looked down over the mountain at the freezing, shivering children pushing their way through the wet snow. But now, watching the miserable children wasn't fun anymore. He knew how they felt as they made their way to school, and a soft, sad feeling mixed with guilt wavered in his breast like a chilled, troubling wind. He saw himself rampaging through the village, terrorizing every child in sight, even gleefully scaring the very ancients hobbling along on canes, and he shook his head. Then he remembered his laughing face and his hands slapping his knees until his ribs hurt. To try and make up for his heartless rampages, Filibert decided, "I will give those children hats." But just as quickly he shook his head angrily and thundered at the troubling wind coursing through him. Why should I give those children my hats? What a screwball idea. It's taken hundreds of birthdays and lots of hard work to fill my lair. Let those scaredy cats get their own. However, early the next morning, Filibert found himself standing in front of his lair watching the children way off in the distance. It had stormed during the night, and the snow was deep and nearly blocking the cottage doors and hung around the windows like swaths of white lace. Two blonde pig-tailed girls had fallen behind the line of others and were beginning to whimper and cry. A red-faced boy had turned back and was trying to help them along. "I'm tellin' ya, Beta," Filibert could hear the boy admonish, breathing hard. "If you don't catch up, your ears'll freeze off, and your nose too. So come on, Lizzie and Molina. Hurry, ya never know when that dragon'll come." Hearing the boy, Filibert could not help but smile. And he let out a fearsome roar, threw up his hands and muttered angrily to himself, "Let their ears fall off, and their noses too." But then, he noticed a strange wavering in his voice, and frowned and returned to his lair. To put the children out of his mind, he dillied and dallied with his ribbons and bows and all the blindingly bright satin hats, the pinks and reds, and yellowy greens. As hard as he tried to keep the cold wind from whispering, its low, commanding voice just kept getting louder and louder until it thundered in his head. "Filibert, you're being selfish. Give those children your hats." Just as if there were rocks in his pockets, Filibert's guilt began weighing him down. There was plenty of time before he would go down into the village to tear about, roaring great orange streaks of fire, his tremendous tail knocking everything helter-skelter, sending the villagers flurrying in fear. "I'll just do a quick tidying up," he thought. "That'll stop that nagging wind." In a sudden fit of energy, surprising himself, Filibert dashed outside, grabbed the old wooden wagon from around the back of the mountain and parked it in front of his lair and started stacking hats along the bottom, thick woolens first, embroidered on top. "Oh no," he exclaimed, standing back. "Those hats won't do, they're way too big." And he raced back inside and looked around. The perfect size, he thought, spotting the little hats he had made his dragon dolls. At once, Filibert started grabbing hats off the dolls and neatly stacking them in the wagon. Just a couple more ought to do it, he thought, and dropped to his knees and began pulling dolls out from beneath the bed. His eyes fixed on the lavender felt hat his mother had given him for his first birthday, and he snatched it too, in case he decided to wear two. After balancing a full box of warm-looking doll caps atop the others, Filibert nodded with satisfaction. The sun was going down and everywhere purple shadows lay on the snow like exhausted trees. The village women would be preparing suppers, the men not yet home, the children about to let out from school. Muffled up in his plaid woolen scarf, long red overcoat, and tall red and green paisley top hat, almost running with excitement, wagon bumping, Filibert pulled his load down the mountain trail and tiptoed over to the schoolhouse door. Just as he did, a little boy of about 8 stepped outside. He gasped, stared up at Filibert, and started screaming. Out of natural ferocity, a flicker of dynamite sparked in Filibert's heart. Just about to flash his dagger-sharp teeth at the boy and thrash his monstrous tail, he paused. He considered the boy's thin, miserable clothes, his blue terrified eyes, his face twisting with fear. He had never been so close to a human child before. As soon as they saw him coming, they always screamed and ran away so fast. He never actually felt the children's fear. Just then, tender-heartedness seemed to have taken hold in Filibert, for he did not feel mean anymore. He did not feel fierce. He did not feel scary. He just felt sorry. That's when Filibert swallowed his fire, and he started swishing his great green tail and whirling around like one of the ballerinas in Mr. Edgar Degas's beautiful painting. The little boy began to laugh, and the other children rushed to the door and lifted their eyes up to Filibert's smiling face, the line of his mouth, a great big upturned curve, and they started laughing too, because none had ever seen a smiling, pirouetting dragon. Filibert bent his enormous scaled body forward and took the boy's small hand in his gigantic paw and began to whirl him around and around. The following day, the sky blue and low, the snow still flurrying, doll hats of every kind, fury caps and woolen hats and French chapeaux and others with funny shapes made hundreds of years ago when they were high-style bobbed gaily toward the schoolhouse. Watching and smiling, Filibert stood on his ledge. And then he went back inside, picked up his pot of glue and began to whistle. As it turned out, Filibert was not a heartless dragon after all. He was just Filibert. The Dragon and His Village by Srivastava. Somewhere within a distant mountain sat a dragon atop a pile of gold. This was not a scary dragon, with rows of razor-sharp teeth and talons the size of full-grown men. This dragon had claws which it could at best use to scratch the scales behind its pointy ears, and while it did have sharp teeth, it had developed a liking for vegetarian options, particularly bounties of fruits and steamed root vegetables. It liked to add in the occasional pot roast or succulent grilled chicken, but on the whole it preferred the colorful, leafy kind of food. This dragon was named Sam, and his mountain was Etenmut in the north of a green land. The halls in which it basked were grandiose, with thick columns supporting vaulted ceilings and little walkways crisscrossing from place to place. Now, you may say you've never seen such a mountain, much less one filled with gold and jewels. Well, you'd be right. But Etenmut was not a mountain like many others. In a bygone age, dwarves, yes, dwarves, had trudged along those walkways and carved out these great halls. There had been parties of mythical magnificence thrown here. Now dwarves have long since left the world to an unknown fate, and Sam had stumbled upon this ancient city while exploring the mountain range for homes. Pure serendipity, said Edward, his dragon friend. The serendipity meant Sam had lived a long, fruitful life. Dragons can live for thousands of years, and in those years a village had sprung up in the valley below Sam's abode. For some time, Sam had watched its people mingle about their days, building a mill upon the river, clearing out little bits of forest for their crops. Not being particularly hungry, Sam never thought to approach them. However, one day a strong breeze was blowing up from the valley, and the scent of freshly baked garlic, asparagus, and sweet potatoes wafted up to the entrance of his cave. "My, what an enchanting aroma," Sam said, and he felt hunger gnaw at him. Without thinking, he unfurled his wings and glided down to the village. Chaos ensued, for even though Sam was perfectly pleasant, the sight of his giant body descending from the mountains was enough to make even the most lion-hearted man panic. He soon found himself staring down about 60 men with an assortment of pitchforks, swords, and bows, none of which would have hurt him in the slightest. "Dragon!" cried the largest of the men, who also wore a golden circlet on his head. Sam raised his eyebrows and said, "Wait, I mean you no harm." Surprised to find that a dragon could speak their language, the villagers paused and looked to their leader. "What do you want?" he asked suspiciously. Abashed, Sam said, "Something smelled good down here, such that I have never smelled before." "What would that be? The scent of humans?" Sam shook his large head. No, something roasted on a fire." The leader looked to his men. Was anyone preparing for the feast tonight? One man raised a trembling hand. "My wife was making asparagus and sweet potatoes." "Bring them here," barked the leader. Now, there's no need for that tone," reproached Sam. Soon, a woman came out of a little hut bearing a tray of sizzling food. As soon as the steam hit Sam's wide nose, he smiled and said, "Yes, that's it. So this is called asparagus and sweet potatoes." "Yes, it is," said the leader. "Now, if we relent to give you this food, will you leave us forever?" "Oh, I would not dream of taking it from you," said Sam. He used his claws to dig at the scales on his underbelly, from which a shower of gold coins fell to the ground. The villagers gaped and Sam said, "I would be happy to pay for it, and for your friendship, if you'd like." "Friendship?" said the leader haughtily. "No village I have ever heard of has become friends with a dragon." "Yes," said Sam sadly. "My fellow dragons do not like the warmth this far south." A cold breeze made the men shiver. "But I find it tolerable. Besides, the dwarven gold deposit is something I could not deny." "Gold?" "Well, yes. Where do you think all of this came from?" asked Sam, gesturing at the glittering stuff underneath him. "It gets caught in my scales a lot. Quite a bother, actually." Perhaps it was a mark of the strength of this man that he did not immediately raise his men to raid the cave, for they most certainly would have been destroyed in the fight, but instead chose to extend his hand and said, "I am William, and this is the village Stara, our home. We would be delighted to make your acquaintance." Sam gingerly extended a single talon and shook William's tiny hand. The villagers gave him the food in exchange for the heap of gold, and so the relationship was bound. Now, of course, as with all relationships, there are moments of hardship, but for the most part Sam was able to watch the village prosper over the years into a large city. It had survived wars in which kings had implored Sam to rain fire down upon their enemies, which he did not do, and there had been many attempts by thieves to get the gold from Sam's cave. However, the path to the cave's entrance was treacherous at best, and so only 3 men had ever survived to see the dwarven city, and none held their ground if Sam so much as looked at them. Now the time had come for the next in William's line to lead the city, which was now the capital of a kingdom. Sam had learned a lot about men in his centuries watching over the people of Stara, and most of it had made him sad, for the gold that Sam hoarded in his mountain was no longer of great intrigue to him. Even for a dragon, he was getting old, and he knew the time would come soon where he would return north to die with his kind. The gold in his mountain would have doubled the wealth of the nation below, but he had deliberately stopped himself from giving them great sums, instead choosing to let them have little trickles of gold in exchange for things like roast vegetables, for he knew that above all, greed festered in the hearts of humans. He had seen every new king be crowned, and tomorrow he would see it again, and every last one had asked for a large chunk of gold. Some disguised it by saying they wanted no more, but none refused, and all held Sam in great regard for his wealth. What was he to do? His friend Edward had visited again just a week prior and had advised him to bring the gold northward to their dragon home, where it could be enjoyed by all dragons, young and old alike, who coveted shiny things. But how was Sam to carry it? Even after centuries of giving, it remained sizable enough for him to sleep on as a rounded mattress. "Trust me," Edward had said, "the men down there don't deserve this gold." But he offered no solution to the problem of carrying it hundreds of miles north, so Sam bade his friend goodbye and returned to pondering his dilemma. The people of Stara relied on the gold from Sam to continue their lives, so would it really be wrong to give it all to them? Perhaps not, but he was no longer convinced of their altruism as he had been during the days of William I. When the village had little more than a few paddocks of animals and some rows of crops, there was no harm which could foul the hearts of the men who resided there. Yet after centuries of wars and expansion, Sam had seen the kings of Stara destroy villages all over the countryside, enveloping them into their land. Did he really want to feel the fire of war? Sam flew down from his cave on the next day to see King Richard crowned. A special place had been made for him in what was called the Hall of Dragons. It was made of white stone and had pillars as tall as those in the dwarven city. Sam sat in his usual seat. hundreds of civilians craning their necks to see over the armor of tall soldiers as the king walked down a long carpet. His father, now quite old, sat upon the throne with the crown in his hands. Trumpets played a hopeful melody, and the old king, helped to his feet by his top advisors, placed the crown upon his kneeling son's head. There was some speech about honor, valor, and humility. Sam had heard many such speeches and was trying not to fall asleep. As was custom, the new king came up to him after the ceremony and bowed deeply, and for this Sam was obligated to bestow upon them several hundred gold coins from his scales as a present. His eyes met Richard's, and he caught himself in the moment looking at a young man with tenacity and a will to do what was right. This gave him pause, for he had been so used to kings having the veiled greed in their gaze as they looked upon the rich dragon. It seemed that Richard lacked this trait. The dragon did not stay for the evening's revelries. He took his large ration of his favorite foods back up to his cave and enjoyed them in silence. It wasn't until later that night, when sleep was just beginning to wash over him, that he was awoken by a ringing sound on the rock. Sam stood on his haunches, recognizing the sound as boots upon stone, and he thought that once again some robber had come to quarrel over his lot. He used one of his claws to push a button on the right side of the hall. By the ingenuity of dwarves, sparks lit several hundred lanterns along the walls and on the ceiling in quick succession, bathing the hall in a warm yellow glow only amplified by the pile of gold. Sam's eyes searched for the intruder for a while. He was looking near the shadowy edges of the room, near all the pillars and stairwells. That was where criminals usually lingered, after all. However, a light at the center quickly drew his gaze. Before him, to his great surprise, stood King Richard, a torch in one hand and his other raised in a gesture of peace. He wasn't wearing any kingly clothes, just a black coat over dark trousers and climbing boots. He bowed to Sam and said, "Please, excuse my interruption. Never before has a king of Stera come here," said Sam dubiously. "The way is dangerous." Richard shrugged. "I spent my early years climbing everything I could get my hands on, away from my mother's prying eyes, of course. I was under the assumption that kings are usually well guarded. How did you slip away?" "It was not easy. I had to wait until the zenith of the night's darkness, and fortunately it's a new moon and the stars are veiled by clouds." The next question was perhaps the most pertinent to Sam. "Why have you come, Richard?" "I know what you think," said Richard candidly, putting down his free hand. "You think I am here for your gold, that I come to beseech upon you a case of charity." "Yes, that is what I think," said Sam. "Or at least, I do not think you are here to clear away my empty trays of food." Richard smiled. "You are right on the second count, but I am not here to seek your gold. In fact, I am here to be rid of it." "Oh." Sam's heart thudded under his hard scales. Nodding, Richard said, "Indeed, I have studied dragons for many years. They are not common in this part of the country. I was under the impression that most of your kind live in the far, far north past the glaciers of ice and the frozen mountains which render our kind at an impasse." "That is correct," said Sam. "Neridhe, we call it. The cold quells the fires of young dragons and steals the hearts of the elders until it is time for them to pass on. And I have also studied all the records of your residence here," said Richard. "You are getting quite old for a dragon, are you not?" "Old, but still spry," said Sam. Richard gave a dry laugh and said, "Indeed. What does this have to do with the gold?" "Quite simply, I know you must be wondering what to do with it, for in this century or the next your life will end, and with it will end any protection upon this wealth. The way may be dangerous for us now, but I'm sure once the first man comes back with a bag full of gold unperturbed by your death, then hordes of others will attempt it. I fear for that day, for I know what men can be when greed drives them. I have seen it in my father and his father." He looked at a loss for words, but then added, "I have spent my entire adult life trying to make Stera a rich kingdom, independent of your influence." "But your family still accepted my gifts," said Sam. "Of course, and I will too. If you do not accept my proposal, but know that I succeeded." A glint of pride lined Richard's blue eyes. "We do not need your charity to thrive as a kingdom anymore, not that we don't appreciate it." "So that means, my dear dragon, that you are free of any burden to help us," said Richard proudly. Sam frowned, his teeth showing at the front of his mouth. To be sure, he did not know how to feel about this information, for while the issue of his gold had been troubling him for a while, he had grown used to this relationship with Stera, where he showered them with occasional gold and they gave to him the best food he could ask for. To hear that it was no longer necessary hurt him in some way, but he quickly put on a smile and said, "I am happy for you. That can't have been easy." It wasn't, and as I said, if you choose to continue your gift-giving I will gladly accept, but know that it will only be used to further the opulence of already gilded halls, which I hardly think is a noble cause. "You mentioned you had a proposal," said Sam. "What is it?" Yes." Richard grinned. "Now, I want you to be with your family when you are in the last stages of your life. So, I propose you take whatever gold and jewels there are here and melt them." "Melt them?" repeated Sam, tilting his head. "The world knows no fire hotter than dragon fire. It can melt even jewels. So, before you go, use your fire to melt all the gold in this city. Make it run through the halls and through any crevices in the rock. Then smash these columns as you leave." Richard pointed to the columns around the chamber. "It is sure to bring the rocks down upon this treasure. How can my last act in this city, which I have seen grow from such humble beginnings, be of violence?" asked Sam. He did not want to destroy much of anything these days. "It must be," said Richard. "I will inform the citizens of Stera that it was a quake which destroyed the hall, and that you took your leave with me in private. It may be a little difficult for them to understand how a dragon secured a private meeting with me, but I can convince them of it. I will tell them the truth, that you have moved on to live with your kind as you prepare for your next journey. Years will pass as men try to ascend the mountain. Decades will pass before they learn the wealth they seek lies behind solid rock, and still more will pass before our mining tools are good enough to break through to any new veins of gold you have created here. I may not even be king anymore, then. But if they still find my, said Sam, finally understanding. You wish for them to find it slowly, and with decades of hard work behind it. I have been over the plan in my head many times, said Richard. It's sure to work. Sam looked past the young king now and envisioned that home he hadn't seen in over 1,000 years. He could almost feel the comforting chill of that ice on his scales again. He turned back to Richard and said, You are wise beyond your years, young man. I accept your offer, and am glad to have had the opportunity to know you. Richard bowed deeply. It is I who should be grateful to you, Sam. Without you, this kingdom would not be what it is now. Then I will take my leave in the early morning, said Sam. No sense in lingering on goodbyes. Goodbye then, noble dragon. Goodbye, Richard. And so the king made his way back down to his people, still cloaked against prying eyes, and in the wee hours of the morning, as dawn was just creeping over the horizon, Stera felt the ground shake as Sam slipped out of Ettenmoot, unfurling his wings and beginning the long, humble flight northward to his home. The New Cat by Alexander Hanna. There were only 2 men sitting at the bar. They were well engaged in conversation and did not take any interest in the crowd of people that had come in and sat down since they had first arrived. They were sitting at the end of the bar, admiring the many lit-up skyscrapers the view had to offer at night. Enigmatic lines in the floor turned the back half of the room purple, turning into a bright rust color around the bar. The bartenders were busy pouring and mixing and serving and running around so all the people in the bar could get the confidence they had ordered. Huddled in separate groups, the people collectively talked and laughed and were serious and oblivious to what everyone else was saying around them. One of the men, a young, yet tired-faced man, while looking out the window at the skyline asked, What do you think most people are doing right now? Easy. Drinking. His friend answered. Why? They want to live happy lives. The tired-faced man turned around and looked at all the people congregating. Some of their faces were lit up by the white screens of their smartphones, others sipped their fruitfully colored drinks through two little black straws. They smiled at the people they wanted something from, and laughed at jokes they didn't hear. "I'm feeling a bit sick. I think I'm gonna head out," the tired-faced man said. "You feeling sick? Have a Pinot Grigio. That will cure you right up." No. I need to get some air. Maybe I'll come with you. It's getting a bit stuffy in here for me too." "Don't be stupid. Go meet some strangers and have fun." Very few people meet strangers spontaneously anymore, you know that. "What are you gonna do?" "I think I might go to bed early." "You think too much," his friend frankly stated. "It worries me. You know that I know you're not going to bed early. I read online that thinking too much is bad for your health. Like smoking a pack of cigarettes every day. I've seen a lot of people fall into the abyss because they use that mind of ours a little too much. What they don't realize is it wasn't meant to be used all the time. When the hunter-gatherers were done hunting and gathering for the day, they relaxed and spent time with each other. What they did back then is exactly the same thing most people are doing today. We work and then we relax afterwards. They looked at the stars together and we drink together. It's basic evolutionary psychology. We as humans have been doing this for millions of years. Life is fun when we talk to other humans late into the night. It's boring, and might I add, sad, when we spend life alone in our room sulking over the unknowns of the universe. Yeah, I know. It's not that. I just need some sleep. It's the cat. The friend interjected. What? Ever since you got that new cat, you've been spending a lot less time out. The tired-faced man looked away from his friend and back out the window at the skyscrapers. Don't look out the window. The tired-faced man turned around. Let's go somewhere. Let's get a group of people and let's go to the Caribbean. What did you say to that? I don't know. Vacationing in the Caribbean's pretty expensive. No, it's not. Didn't you hear? It's the poor Americans' Mediterranean. We're poor. Do you have to go to the office on Monday? The friend said with a laugh. Poor in time, indeed. The tired-faced man looked around at the crowd. Young, lively, fresh faces. Aren't people in their 30s supposed to still be young? He asked. See, you look at the world in the wrong way. To be quite frank, you look at the world in a negative way. This is why you spend all your free time with your new cat. You shouldn't be looking at those who are younger and going, how do I get back there? What you should be asking yourself is, what do I know that they don't? What experiences have I had that they haven't? You see, it's all about framing your mindset. The tired-faced man looked at him but said nothing. We're 36 and single. Never married and no kids. Society says that's bad, right? But there's no intrinsic value in what society says. Society can and will keep talking nonsense because that's what society does. The intelligent thoughts sink to the bottom and the bullshit thoughts float to the top. The tired-faced man looked away from his friend and towards the pretty bartender. Hey, if you don't want to talk to me, and if you won't flirt with her, we can call it a night and you can go and spend time with your new cat. But let me just say this. The cat won't bring you happiness. Pets are awesome, but not as awesome as humans. Yay, but this cat. He speaks. But this cat what? It understands me. And I understand him. They stared into each other's eyes for a brief moment. The tired-faced man's friend then turned and grabbed his Pinot Grigio off the bartop. He put what was left in the wine glass down his throat in one gulp. Then, turning back to the conversation. What does that even mean? I'm starting to think this is a prank. Are there cameras around here? The friend said, looking around the bar and up at the ceiling. What do you mean, man? I mean, we understand each other. I need more than that. Like, he said under his breath. We emotionally understand each other. We understand each other's feelings. We get one another. Like the therapy dogs that go to schools after shootings, I have a therapy cat. You understand what I'm saying, don't you? At this, the friend started to laugh heavily. The tired-faced man stood up and put 2 20s down on the bartop. As the tired-faced man made his exit. Wine. It's good for your mental health. His friend at the bar yelled to him. No one heard what he said though. They were all too busy smiling at the people they wanted something from, and laughing at jokes they didn't hear. Jokes they didn't hear. Jokes